Welcome, Megan. I'm so happy to have you here. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
It's truly my pleasure. And the topic is always hot, as I mentioned before. But before we start talking a little bit about money, would you like to share a little bit about your story so we can get to know you a little bit better, please?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Megan Dwyer. Most importantly, I am a mom to two young boys. They're 5 and 7. They are chaotic and awesome, and they teach me so much more about life than I could ever learn anywhere else. I am also a certified financial planner. That's the day job, and where I'm working with individuals and families to help them work through whatever they're going through right now, and create this kind of holistic financial well-being. Um, I also am a host. I host my own podcast called Money Isn't Scary, and I started that about 3 years ago during the pandemic when I was struggling, and I know a lot of other people were at that time as well. I had at the time I was working full time from home. I had a 3 and a 1 year old, and my husband had been laid off, and so I was really having a hard time figuring out my purpose and my place, and I was pulled in so many different directions. And I think we all were kind of going through a hard time during that time. So I realized that I was coping through that difficulty by I was online shopping. I was just doing things that I realized I didn't really after a while, I realized I didn't need to do. Like I was buying clothes when I wasn't going anywhere, right? I was buying shoes, and I realized, a couple months later, they would still have tags on them. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Right. And I always had this kind of like feeling of guilt afterwards. And so I wanted to explore that more. And I knew that if I was doing this, I was not alone. And I know very well that what's personal is universal. So I really just wanted to share the story.
Mhm.
I also knew that from working with clients, I had seen so many times clients' stories of scarcity, right, come up, and we would run long-term analysis, and we would look at cash flows for clients, and we could tell a client, right, based on your goals and where you're at, that you're going to be just fine. Like you're going to be okay. We stress tested this for all these different variables. And yet sometimes they would still have such a hard time believing that. And
Mhm.
so I knew from that it became clear to me that there's something more than just what's on the surface. There's beliefs,
Mhm.
there's stories, there's fundamental um, thoughts around how life should be that get in the way and that impact our relationship with money. So I really wanted to take this approach with the podcast of sort of working through my own relationship with money, which is really working through my own relationship with myself and my own worthiness that I discovered along the way, right? But taking it from the angle of money.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's amazing. I will be honest, Megan. I was born in former Yugoslavia, and during 90s there was a civil war and the biggest inflation I have ever witnessed in my life. So
Yeah.
I remember my grandfather could buy just two apples with his retirement for the whole.
Wow.
And it was very hard for me to get from there to where I'm now. I even went on hypnotherapy. So I
Yeah.
understand limiting
Yeah.
beliefs and all of that. We all have that. But when we talk about money, I'm sure there are certain areas you are specializing in helping women.
Mhm.
We actually, we tend to play small. What are these areas? How you can help us with that? Still, I believe that a lot of women are playing very small.
Absolutely. Yeah. And before I get into that, I just want to acknowledge what you just said and reiterate that, yeah, like there's generational beliefs and traumas that get passed on, right? So just because you didn't go through what your grandfather went through doesn't mean that you're not feeling that underneath, right? So that's something I
Exactly.
think that's important that we all acknowledge. And that helps, I think, with the self-awareness component to this. We've all gone through stuff, whether it's us or whether it's the generations before us, and that we're still holding on to it. So it's our job to uncover and figure out what that is,
Mhm.
and work through it ourselves so we don't continue those patterns of passing it on to our kids and their kids, right?
Mhm.
But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of ways that women play small, and again, that's part of the goal here that I had with my podcast is making sure that, or at least helping to bring light to that and create that self-awareness. So I think the first and foremost, one of the biggest ways that we play small is by not having the knowledge, right? So I put this first because I think it is by far the most important. And I am not saying that you have to be a financial planner or a master's in finance, but we just need to have a basic understanding of our own personal financial situation, which will include, a net worth statement. So looking at your assets and your liabilities, and an understanding of cash flow. So income pre and post tax and expenses.
Mhm.
And this alone, these two kind of fundamental, kind of core, like we'll call them reports, but kind of fundamental knowledge is incredibly empowering. As women, it's so easy to, tend to avoid or default to letting someone else handle this for us.
Mhm.
And I think we all know that the more that we avoid, the harder it gets, the more intimidated we become, right? So I think it's really, really important to lean into that discomfort and just get curious, right? Um, so another way that we also tend to play small is earning, and I think we're conditioned through our culture to not be as aggressive as men are, and we oftentimes, I do this all the time, undervalue our work. And I think this is particularly important for women entrepreneurs as well. Women, tend to not charge people or find the right pricing because all goes down to worthiness. We don't think that what we're offering adds value, and therefore that we don't add value and we're not good enough, right?
Mhm.
Or maybe that somebody else can do it better, so they deserve the money more than we do. This is all a lot of imposter syndrome, right? Because I think we tend to charge what we think we're worth rather than what the value really may be out there. So there's some misalignment, and I think that misalignment really comes down to mindset. As I just said, it happens a lot with women entrepreneurs, but it's not exclusive to women entrepreneurs. I've worked a W-2 job my entire career, and I have often and still do struggle with what I felt is my own worth. So much so that instead of having a direct conversation, I will avoid it and therefore, often feel underappreciated and resentful as a result. So I think this is very common, and this is something that is more of an internal work than it is external.
Mhm.
Um, there's a couple other areas I just want to touch on, and I know I'm getting a little long-winded
No,
here,
no,
but
no, no. Please, please. The stage is yours, Cal.
yeah. Spending is also really important as well. I love this one because it's so universal. We, as women, and me especially, tend to use spending as a coping strategy. I was just talking about that in my story, when we started this. But I'm often not buying things that I really want or I even need. I'm buying things that I don't want necessarily or I don't need because I get this little high. It's like a dopamine hit, right? It's
Exactly.
to get this almost like rush to make us feel better temporarily. Um, I equate it to like having the glass of wine or the quick fix, right? That's going to make your problems go away in that moment because it's uncomfortable to sit with them. It's uncomfortable to sit with it, right? But again, doing that doesn't solve the underlying problem. It's putting a band-aid on a bullet hole. So I think we really need to kind of start to dig in a little deeper to our spending habits and think about, and this is stuff I talk about on the podcast a lot, is aligning our spending with our intentions, our values, our priorities, right?
Mhm.
Um, and the last thing I'll mention here around where women play small is negotiating. And this is kind of similar to earning that I just mentioned, but I think all humans do this, but in particular women, when we are faced with a threat whatever it is. It could be that we're being chased by a tiger, but it could also be that there is a chance that we could be judged or we could be not liked. That's
Mhm.
also a threat,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
When we're in that situation, we tend to want to stay safe.
Mhm.
It's our natural social conditioning.
Mhm.
But it's funny that we just accept this for what it is and we don't really do anything about it. And I think a lot of that is because it's embedded into our subconscious. We may not even be aware that it's happening.
Mhm.
So when women initiate negotiation, we're kind of seen differently as men are. So we're already at a disadvantage. We could be perceived as pushy. We could be seen as aggressive or unlikable, which is incredibly uncomfortable for us. It's incredibly uncomfortable for me. So I'm speaking for women as a whole here, but it really is for me. Because again, we've been socialized to want to be liked, to want to kind of fit in with that tribe, and that feels safe to us. And when we're not, when we don't fit in, it's super, super uncomfortable. And this all goes back to that kind of wanting to be liked thing and not pushing any buttons and just doing like we're told. So
Mhm.
again, things that probably are in our subconscious and we don't even recognize because we're just kind of used to doing it every day. But it's really important when we think about, it on the bigger scale and how these kind of actions and behaviors are keeping us small.
What I've noticed that you mentioned, and what happened to me actually, is the importance of the mindset. Before I started my own business, I was a programmer, and programmers have nice salary anywhere you work. But I was six figures in debt in bank loans, for the
Mhm.
apartment, for the car, the consuming society, and all of that. Until one day, my husband said, "You graduated economics. You should handle your expenses a little bit better, my love." So we
Very
opened an
kindly.
Excel sheet. So I wanted to prove him it's not about me. And
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
it was about me. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
definitely about me. And this is where I became aware. But I will be honest, I went through 18 personal growth programs from different sources to change my limiting beliefs, because from where I came from and that fact that I really didn't have food on the table to eat back
Yeah.
then. It's like wired in me.
Of course.
Now it's not. Like it's there, but still, I'm handling it much better. Um, is mindset and elimination or transformation, reprogramming limiting beliefs so much important, or actually we change as humans and maybe, our self-confidence grows? So, like, do you believe money is energy, or what are your thoughts about that?
I do. I absolutely believe money is energy, and money is just a tool. It's a resource to help us get to where we want to be. Um, and it all starts with mindset. Because if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe that there is a different path for you, there's not going to be. You're gonna continue to do those kind of self-sabotaging behaviors, or you're gonna just keep feeling like that victim, which is, in my mind, that is a self-sabotaging behavior because it's not putting the onus on you.
Mhm.
So there's always something that you can do. There's always an action you can take. And I think that if you believe that, you have to come from that place instead of kind of the world is out to get me. You have to say, hey, no, I'm here to, I'm here to tackle it. I can do this. Right.
Mhm.
And that's easier said than done. And I'm sure from your experience, I mean, that's a huge shift for you to go from, not having food on the table to where you are now. And there was probably no way you could have done that without believing in yourself,
Mm.
right?
Or I had a good mentors who
Well,
believed
that's
in
exactly,
me.
you need somebody. I also think that that's exact. Yes, you need somebody to believe in you so that you can believe in yourself, right? If you're really at that place where you can't believe in yourself, and that is part of the community, and that's part of the aspect in my mind, I think, of the work that you're doing now. But it's also the reason why I do this. There's a reason why there's people out there that are out there that are there to inspire you, and it's not about competition. It's about bringing up other women with you, right? So if somebody else can do it, you can too. It's just you have to get into that mindset of it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
when we connect to our higher purpose,
Yeah.
then, as you said, money is a tool to get
Yeah.
us where we want to be, and we need that tool to really make an impact. This is what happened in my mind. But what about talking or not talking about money? Money. Oh,
Yeah.
we were raised maybe not to talk about money. Money doesn't grow on
Yes.
trees, and so on and so forth. While now I have a son also who is 7 years old, and we completely differently, I have a completely different approach than my parents did. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about that? Talking about money or not talking, and how?
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's such a great segue from what we were just chatting about. But um, I also come from a house where we did not talk about money. It was like, I'd be out at the store with my mom and, I'd ask for something like every little kid does. And she's like, no, no, we can't have that. Got to wait till your father gets paid. And then it would be like the one day of the month that my dad did bills. And it was like, leave him alone. He's going to be grouchy. Don't go near dad and his bills that day. So, but other than that, it was just more the messages that I received. It wasn't, we never actually had a conversation around what money does, how money helps us, what money means to us. Right. And it was more some of the messages that I kind of secondhand got from my mom kind of comparing herself to other people. And so I think that's where, again, we kind of continue to inherit some of those messages, that scarcity message. It's just passed on. But yeah, money in our culture is very taboo. And talking about it, I think, is so crucial um, to addressing the anxiety
Mm-hmm.
that comes along with it, right? Um, But when we don't talk about money, honestly, it keeps us, in my mind, it's another way of keeping us small. It keeps us, in a way, ignorant, right? We don't see that there's tools out there. We don't see that there's, habits that we can change. Um, I just think that the more that we don't talk about it, the more that we avoid, the more that women continue to um, push away something that makes us scared. And I also think that it has, if we don't talk about money, say, in a family, it has an impact on marriage too, because I feel like that we need to have open communication around something. What are the stats, right? That money is
Mm-hmm.
the cause of the biggest cause of divorce. Well, if you're not open and talking about who's earning what, where the dollars are going, then the more is hidden and the more anxiety is going to be caused around it too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then even at a higher level, right, like at a cultural level, I think the taboo and not talking about money, it helps to continue to foster that gender pay gap, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't help towards it. I think, again, not talking about money means women are not educated around it, meaning they're not going to stand up for themselves. They're not going to advocate for themselves. They're less likely to negotiate for a higher salary, right? So all that's doing is just, in my mind, continuing to to keep women at a disadvantage, keep women kind of as the minority, and continue to keep us from earning the same amount as women, the same amount as men would. So I think, again, it all starts at home, and there are plenty of tools and strategies to talk about money with kids. I actually just had somebody on my podcast. I interviewed her last week that wrote a whole book on how to talk to kids about money at different ages and stages in their lives. And I encourage everyone to be able to find a resource and find a way to be able to talk to your kids about it. But it all starts at home. So it's again, it's breaking those generational patterns. But I think it's so important because we don't want to see our sons and daughters go out there and, be making less than anybody else just because they can't advocate for themselves or they don't want to. I'm sorry, I can't hear you all of a sudden. Did I mute myself? No. Are you muted? I can't hear you all of a sudden.
And now?
Oh, now I can. Yep, yep.
Never mind, we will fix that in post-production. I did hear you all the time, so something.
Okay, good. No, it
I
was
just
just when you talked that one time I couldn't hear you. I could see your mouth, but not your.
okay. Now you can. Okay. What I wanted to mention is you mentioned a very, very important thing, and that's breaking the generational patterns.
Yeah.
There is one very beautiful thing which I actually learned from my mom. Even at that time of lack, she was always telling me there is always someone who has less than you.
Hmm.
So even if you don't have, and you believe that you don't have enough, give away someone who has less than you.
Hmm.
And even then, we accepted a family of 6 people who were refugees to our home, which was very huge. There were 12 of
Wow.
us not having
Wow.
anything on the table.
Yeah.
But as you see, we did make it. So, what I wanted to say is that how I feel now about money is a pure energy of love, not for the sake of having more material things,
Hmm.
but for the sake of being able to make a bigger impact in my business
Yes.
when I have
Yes.
more money.
Yeah.
Because helping people who have their purpose to make a difference in the world, it's what makes us
Yeah.
make
It's not about the pile of things. In my mind,
exactly.
it's what are those things? It's never about the thing, it's about the feeling behind the thing. What is that feeling that you get from having that thing, right? It's not about
Exactly.
the big house or the car or the fancy vacation, right? It's about whatever. Let's dig a little deeper. It's that feeling of, like you said, love and being able to take care of the people that you love, right? It's about freedom and being able to come and go and do what you want in life instead of being backed into a corner and say, hey, you have to do this, right? There's only one option. There's so much more there if we just dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface.
I definitely agree. What about, I noticed a lot of people, um, the less they have, the more they have a need to showcase like they have more through
Yeah.
different brands or something like that. Is there a feeling of, I don't know, feeling better behind that? Or there is a lack of self-confidence and then maybe a need
Yeah.
to showcase like the material things?
I
What are
think
your
it's
thoughts about that?
insecurity. I think that's just insecurity. And I think it's also again, like the odds are stacked against us. We have to be aware too of the kind of consumerism and materialism culture that we live in. So I think we live in this world where if you have this brand shoes or the more expensive car, the fancier car, people tend to look at you differently. But I think we also need to do our inner work and we need to understand, like, what is it about that brand, what is it about that thing, is it that makes me want that so much? And if it really is just about comparing yourself to somebody else, having something that somebody else doesn't, then that's likely a place that it's likely comes from a place of insecurity, and that's needs to be worked through. And that's taking it a step further. It's probably a worthiness issue. It's saying I'm not good enough just as I am because I have to have this particular pair of shoes or whatever, this sweatshirt, this brand sweatshirt, in order to feel good about myself. But again, as a culture, I think not everyone was taught to that they were not everyone was taught growing up that they were good enough just as they are, right?
Exactly.
Again, because it's what we learned from the generations above us, right? So if I think the goal anyway for me through this kind of this journey is so much more about self-discovery, self-awareness, self-love, but taken from the angle of money. I think the more we learn about ourselves, the more all of our habits around money and our behaviors around money will um, will be in alignment with the direction that we want to go in versus feeling, you know, not feeling right to us or feeling guilt or shame from some of the things that we purchase.
And brands are using that. I
Oh,
mean,
totally.
definitely.
I think about the women's beauty industry. I
Mhm.
mean, how much do they try to teach us that we need to have this brand of mascara or this $150 skin cream, right? Because we aren't good enough just as we are. So we need to look better and therefore we'll feel better, right? It's I was a marketing major in college and I was always fascinated by that, by the messages that brands are trying to teach us or tell us and how young we are when we get those messages.
Exactly. And I was interviewing one also business professional, and we were talking about prices. So I will not name the perfume, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a perfume which Brad Pitt actually like recommends. It's
Yeah.
50 milliliters. It's like $85. But
Mm-hmm.
the true price of the, liquid inside, it's 1.7 euros. So it's like $2.
Right.
And I
Right.
was like in shock, and I was like, what?
But it's Brad Pitt, right?
But
So
it's
everybody
Brad.
wants to feel like like we perceive Brad Pitt to feel, or we want to look like out to the world the way Brad Pitt looks to us, right? So it goes deeper.
Exactly. I was reading Ken Honda's book about happy money, and there was one story about his mentor who, every time when he comes to the restaurant, he leaves a very large tip, and sometimes even a golden coin or something like that. And when he asked him, why are you doing that? Explained that the waitress or waiter will be very happy when they receive that, and they will remember that feeling, which
Yeah.
will actually follow him through the day.
Yeah.
So this is why he was giving away very generously.
I believe that. I believe that's all part of the abundance, right? And if we how do we want to feel? We need to really start to identify how do we want to feel. And we can it doesn't have to be, I'm not saying you have to, give it huge tips to people when you go out to restaurants, but I think taking small action towards that feeling, like he wanted to feel good about himself. And doing something like that, making other people happy, makes him feel good about himself. I think it does for everybody. But we have to do what works within the context of our own lives. But again, it all goes back to the feeling.
Yes, and I'm so happy we touched this because, for example, every year I teach my son to um give away his toys or whatever to
I love that.
kids who have less. So now he learned that there are kids who have less, and he is making little packages, and we're taking that together.
Oh,
And seeing a little kid who is very happy to give something is for me, it's a miracle, and this is the feeling that I have to live with him again, seeing these children actually having something from that.
yeah.
What do you
And
think about all of these ideas of actually, being the light for someone who has less light? I mean, in terms of money, if we're talking about money.
yeah, but I mean, it's universal. It's in so many areas of our life, like being that light. Like we were just talking about it. You had a mentor that believed in you. You want to be able to reciprocate that feeling. I think that's all anybody's looking for, right? We're
Yes.
we looking
Yes.
to get the light when we need it and give that light back to somebody else when they need it, right? So I think that is like the ultimate. That's why we're here. Again, like not for the pile of things, not for the objects. We're here to feel like we matter.
Mhm.
And when we matter, that's when I think we're the most fulfilled, we're the most happy. So I think that's to teach that to kids, that that lesson that it's not all about us, it's about everybody else too. Is and it's tough when at the age of 7 because they kind of compartmentalize and get it,
Yeah,
in a
it's
small
true.
way. But I think that's I'm going to do that with my kids. I mean, we just had Christmas and we have more stuff coming into the house, so we need to start to get things out. And I think showing them that, and I tell them this, but I think implement that they can see it. They can see that there are other kids that don't have as much as they have. Is that experience is a game changer. I feel like once they see it, they can't unsee it, and it's just such a good lesson for kids at that age.
Exactly. And that's how we change the generational patterns, right?
Absolutely,
And this is why I
absolutely.
loved one of the project in my son's school. A teacher asked them to like bake a little cookies for kids from oncology department.
Oh,
So
love. It's
so
awesome.
they are just 7, and they were like baking cookies for other kids. These all
Not for
things,
them to eat, but
not for them to eat. Yeah.
to give to people who don't have it, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of shift that the whole world needs. But
Yeah.
when we talk about money and the woman perception of it, what are the five key things, for example, that every woman should know about her money, and
Yeah.
how what's the best way to approach that?
Yeah, we've touched on a few of these already, so
Hmm.
I'll try to be brief. But the first thing again is we're taught not to like money, right? Like we from those messages that we receive, from the way we grew up, we're taught that even the things that we learned from our parents. I will say this, my mom. So in the US, women were not allowed to have credit cards in their own name until the mid 1970s, 1974. And my mom was a full-blown adult at that point. And it's incredible to me because even though she was a nurse, she always worked, she was empowered, right? She made her own money. She still, I mean, those beliefs that she had were continue to get passed down, right? So we think about that. It's not just on us. It's the messages like we've advanced so much in our culture, but there's still so much that are kind of that's holding women back. So I think we need to be aware of some of those messages that we get out there, and just know that again, kind of the odds are sort of stacked against us. We need to stand up to that, and we need to know that it's okay to like money, and it's okay to know about money, right? It's okay to be curious about it. And it's also okay to have money too, because as you just said, the more money we have, the more good we can do with it. Um, the other thing I would say I just said is that, that women need to know is know your numbers. And I just mentioned this, know your net worth. So your income and I'm sorry, your assets and your liabilities, just put that all together on a piece of paper, an Excel spreadsheet, literally like a back of a napkin with a crayon. It doesn't matter. Just try to have some general knowledge of what you own and what you owe and the specifics around that. What are the interest rates? What are who owns the account? All that kind of stuff. That's so important. And then same on the expense side, or on the income and the expense side, cash flow. So what's coming in, who's earning it, what is the pre and post tax impact, and what are we spending? And I think that's also, there's a lot of shame to that. What are we spending question? And think of it as a very in a non-judgmental way. There's also a lot of if you find that process overwhelming, there's a lot of tools out there that can help you aggregate your accounts and be able to just pull like an annual amount and break it down into category, or a monthly amount and break it down into category. But take this approach without judgment, because this is just getting curious, right? It's just looking at patterns. And once you see it, then if you feel overwhelmed by it, you may not actually know the extent to what the numbers say. Now you see what the numbers say. Now you can do something about it. So that alone is empowering in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I will say is you need to know how to access your accounts. So who I just said you need to know who owns them, but you also need to know how to get into them and look at them, make changes to them if need be. So that's something that I think a lot of us tend to forget about, or we don't know our login to our 401k or whatever. Like we need to start getting more involved in this. And so find a place, write down all your passwords or whatever it is, or how, your the websites. It's so important to be able to know how to get into these accounts, to look at these accounts, and to view them on a consistent basis, because there's a lot of things that change, and you want to be looking at it. You want to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece to this is that I think women need to know is that all spending is emotional. Women tend to get a bad reputation that we are emotional spenders. Women are, again, I said before, women couldn't have a credit card until the mid 1970s. And the reason, the rationale for that was that women were more emotional and therefore not as rational when it comes to making money decisions. But I think that we need to turn that on its head. Women tend to be perceived as more emotional, and that's why we hide it. That's why we go in the bathroom and we cry. That's why we don't do it in front of our kids, and we shut the door or we go away to do it. But I think that emotions need to be embraced. I think emotions tell us things. And I think especially with spending, I mean, we just talked about it's never about the thing. It's about the feeling behind the thing, right? So of course, there's going to be some emotions, whether it's a small purchase or a big purchase. And maybe not on every purchase, but there's going to be some emotions. So I think we need to embrace that and not think of our emotions as a bad thing because they're telling us something. If we have a reaction to, or we feel guilt or we feel shame about something, there's more there. So let's listen to our emotions and recognize that all spending is emotional. And the last thing I want to say here that women need to know is how to practice self-compassion. Um, we again we were not taught this, right? There in my at least generation, it's starting to change now for our kids, but there was no financial education in schools. We were not brought up with this. So how can we possibly know something if we were never taught it, right? So there's three components. I had Dr. Kristen Neff on my show last year, and she's incredible. She's the pioneer in self-compassion research. And she said that there's three main components to self-compassion. It's kindness, it's mindfulness, and most importantly, and this is what really changed the game for me, is what she calls common humanity. So it's basically knowing that you are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that allows us, I think, to be a little bit less harsh on ourselves and know that, hey, again, as I said at the beginning when I started this podcast, if I'm doing this, somebody else out there must be doing this too. I am not an outlier. I am not different. I am just a human having a human experience. And my goal is to help other women understand that they're not alone. There's somebody else in there too. And I feel you. I got you. We can do this together. So self-compassion is a huge, huge part to this process because we need it in order to anytime we're learning something new or anytime we're trying to make a change or create better habits in our lives, we need to recognize that we're not perfect, we're humans, we're not robots, and that we can be kind to ourselves in this process.
This is amazing. What you shared is just a pure gold. It just came to my mind. I'm starting a new company and a friend of mine knows that. And she just sent me a message today saying, I just want you to know that you're not alone.
Mm,
It was
I love
just
that.
what you said now. But for
Yeah.
the end, before we share how people can find you and actually how they can work with you, um, I have an anecdote again. In a
Yeah, I
school,
love these.
my son had a project, and they were making like they were drawing what will they be when they grow up, and then putting it in little cans, and then under the ground in the schoolyard, so they
Oh,
will actually
cool.
dig it out when they're 18 years old.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
All right, it's he has amazing teacher. That's just it, and he drew a bank, and I was like, you want to work in bank because
Yeah,
I studied in the faculty of economics. He knows that and all of that. But even though I learned about finances, my finances were disaster.
yeah.
This is why I'm sharing it. And he said, "No, ma'am, no, mom. I want to own the bank."
Oh, I love
And
that.
I was like, okay, maybe I overdid it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I what my hubby said, they actually played a Monopoly game, you know. So he was buying and selling banks in the Monopoly game, and
Yep.
this is how he
Oh my
got
gosh.
the
Good for
idea.
him. Think big. I love that.
I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but yeah, it looks
That's
like
incredible.
we
Wow.
shifted the mindset, the
What
generational mindset.
absolutely. You sure have. I mean, yeah, whenever I ask my 7-year-old what he wants to be when he grows up, he says a Lego builder. And I'm like, because he loves to play with his Legos. I'm like, you know what, buddy? Like you could be an engineer. Like you could design for Lego for like the company. There's so much big stuff there. And I totally like
And
encourage
I
him to
actually
pursue his
just saw the
passions.
whole new aspect of architecture is based on like a Lego blocks.
Yeah.
Seriously, there is
Yeah.
a startup and a lot of architects and engineers are working on that. So the
Yeah.
houses will be built out of blocks, which looks like Lego and goes and clicks. So there is a
That's
space.
incredible. So there's a lot of opportunities, I know. So it just because he says one thing, I know it's incredible. It's such a different world now. When we were growing up, it was like you could be a couple of things. You could be the
Exactly.
doctor, you could be the teacher or whatever, the firefighter or something, but it's a different world now, and I love it. Kids are
And it's
thinking
good.
so
It's
big.
good for them. I mean, there are good and bad things with the internet and all of that, but
Yeah,
they have much more options and
yeah,
resources.
yeah.
I think we shared a lot of valuable things in this episode, and I'm so glad that you were my guest. If anyone would like to reach out to you or to work with you, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, you can check out my website, which is moneyisn'tscary.com. You can find out more about the podcast, obviously, and I have some blogs. And I also am I'm on Instagram at Money Isn't Scary, and I have and Facebook as well. And I have a Facebook group called the Mindful Money Mamas. And I'm going to be working on later in the year towards doing individual kind of money coaching and mindset coaching around this stuff. So if you're interested, just send me a message. Thank
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you for being my guest. I truly enjoyed, and I hope you did too.
you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Bye.